Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jim McCafferty. I am one of the CrimCon board members. I'm an associate professor at Kennesaw State University. Welcome to CrimCon 2020. This is Thursday, November 19th, stream number 3. This is the 1 p.m. session called Flipping a Criminal Justice PhD to an Alt Academic Data Science Career. We have a panel here that will be doing a roundtable. For anybody that is in the audience, if you're an attendee, if you'd like to ask a question of the panel, there is an icon at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. Please click on that and ask some of your questions there. So I'm going to throw the panel over to the panelists and enjoy the panel.
Thank you very much, Jim. And thank you to the folks for CrimCon for putting this together. And I see we got a bunch of people in the audience as well. So I'm going to just do very brief introductions for the folks on the panel. Folks are going to go into more details, but and everybody here is a doctor, so I'll dispense with the honoraries. But we have Matt Vogel. He's in the criminal justice program at SUNY Albany. Kyleigh Clark-Moorman is she's at Pew right now. And so she's going to give us a little insight into Pew stuff, which was totally new to me. I didn't know that much about it either. And I'm Andy Wheeler. I'm currently in the private sector at a healthcare company called HMS. And so we have one more panelist that's hopefully joining, Jen Gonzalez. And Jen her title is senior policy director there she is, at the Meadows Mental Health Institute. And high level, what I wanted to do here is just give you guys some exposure to potential what they call all academic jobs, so not tenure track jobs. And so I put the term data science in the title, but we all have different titles here. And I don't even like the term all academic because it implies a secondary choice. So I'll let Jen talk later, but me and Jen both intentionally left tenure track jobs to pursue the things that we're doing now. So I don't even think of it as a secondary choice. I think it should be a first choice for a lot of folks. But I'll shut up now and let everybody talk. So it's on to you now, Kyleigh.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you to CrimCon for setting this up. So I will tell you a little bit about myself and my position. If I can actually pull my notes up, here we go. All right, so as Andy said, my name is Kyleigh Clark-Moorman, and I am currently a senior associate for research with the Pew Charitable Trusts, and I work in the Public Safety Performance Project, where we do a vast amount of research on a lot of different criminal justice topics. So we have the Pew Charitable Trust, which is the organization that I work at. And some of you may also have heard of the Pew Research Center, which is our sister organization that does what I would call more intensive research projects, but they don't necessarily focus on criminal justice. But at the Trust, we really focus on policy reform and working directly with policymakers and trying to advance criminal justice topics in the national conversation. I think that we even got a shout out by Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate. So we do a range of topics, of topical research, everything from the environment to what I work on, again, which is criminal justice. And we actually have a few different criminal justice teams. We have my team. We also have a team that works on mental health in jail specifically, and a substance use team that works on substance use issues. And so my team primarily researches jails and community supervision. And like I said, we try to publish national level research reports and also do in-state technical assistance, working directly with policymakers to drive reforms. So Pew is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we are actually funded by a board. All of our different policy lines of work are funded by a board. And so we don't have to worry about securing grants, which is really nice. And we can actually fund partner research to advance our goals, which is also really nice. But we do have to be authorized for renewal every 3 years. And so the documents that we have to get ready for that are essentially like a large grant application, but you pretty much know if you're going to be accepted or not when you're applying. And so just to give you a little information about my trajectory, I started Pew a year and a half ago, and during that time I was still ABD. Since starting, I completed my PhD while working at Pew full time. My day-to-day work is really variable, so I go back and forth on different projects, and I'm everything from a researcher, data analyst, writer, editor, advisor, project manager. So I have a lot of different hats at work, and it's not just necessarily data analysis. Just to give you an example, right now I'm working on a large-scale publication on the national cost of jails, which is really descriptive in nature, but it's had a lot of in-depth data analysis and writing, and that's been my big project since I've been starting at Pew. But in the background of that, I've also been working on the development of new research where we're looking at parole success. We're looking at racial and ethnic disparities in community supervision, and we're also right now looking at justice responses to COVID-19. In addition to that, I'm also coordinating partner-led research on jail populations with John Jay, and also rolling out a survey on probation and mental health with UNC. So again, just a lot of variable products that we're working on getting out to the public. At Pew, the role that I have is really the most data scientist-y role that we have, but as you can tell, it entails a lot of things that are not just strictly data science. So I guess one thing that I want to flag for everyone that's in attendance today is that I think sometimes alternative careers in academia or alternative academia careers are billed as maybe the answer to every woe in academia, right? But I just, this position can still be frustrating at times. We still have a sophisticated bureaucracy like academia. Getting things approved and published can be tricky. And there's also a lot of opinions to take into account, which also means that the research that you're working on isn't necessarily the research that you're most passionate about. That being said, I rarely work a weekend. I have time in the evening to play with my kid. I have time to work on publications. And so the point being is that there are really great things about this job that I love, but it's not the answer to every problem in academia. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're moving forward. In terms of going straight from a PhD to an alt academic career, which is what I did, there are a couple key things that I wanted to share with you all today that you might want to start thinking about as you move through your programs, your grad school programs, or if you're even starting your careers. And so I think the first one that kind of surprised me was that I had a really good record of teaching during my PhD, but none of that counted for my experience when they were kind of totaling whether I had the experience for the position. I don't know if that's the same for every nonprofit, but if you're thinking about going into alternative careers, then I would just suggest diversifying your duties as much as possible when you're in grad school. I also didn't get credit for full-time work when I was in grad school, because according to grad school, 18 hours is full-time work, but according to Pew, 40 hours is full-time work. So it's just another thing to consider when you're trying to determine whether you have the required experience for some of these positions. At the end of the day, I think it's most important that you can spin your experience in a way that aligns with the job. So you can spin teaching into leading a group of people. You have familiarity presenting your ideas. I got a lot of experience credit for doing a independent study that led to a publication, because that's research. So just think about the ways that you might spin that in your resume or in your interview if you have kind of a varied experience. Also, one thing that was a little surprising to me was that when you're applying for jobs like this, and specifically jobs on my team, it's really important that you have both research and code files to submit. So depending on the position you're applying for, most places will require research examples, but the code files was something that I wasn't really ready to present to other people. And so just a note, they should be well annotated and show that you can do data analysis beyond cleaning. And that's just something to think about as you're working through your analyses for your schoolwork or for your dissertation or whatever it may be. And thirdly, which I think is probably the most important thing, is that the audience for your research is different. So in academia, there's a very specific audience for your research, and a lot of them are well-versed in either research or criminology or both. Whereas the people that I work with, the people that direct my team are lawyers or they have MPAs. And so great fields to work with, great fields to be in, but they're not always trained in research or criminology. And so it's a good idea to get experience working with diverse audiences. I've had to explain to people what deterrence theory is or what a t-test is in really easy to understand terms. So you should just be thinking about that when you're thinking about these careers. We also write for an educated layperson, and so we have to be able to communicate these things to different skill levels. And so in that realm, I think it's really beneficial, if possible, to get experience working directly with agencies, administrators, and the community to learn how to translate your findings beyond the academy and be ready to do that when you step into a position like this. And then lastly, I just want to say that, every nonprofit is different, but a lot of them you can start working before you actually have graduated or gotten your PhD. And that is what I did. And so I think it's a good idea that if you're interested in a career like this, to keep an eye out for opportunities throughout your program, because something might come up that you would be completely successful and completely eligible for while you're still in school. And with that, I will turn it back over to, I'm either tossing it to someone or turning it back to Andrew.
So Matt's going to go next, but I'm just going to say to the folks quick. So there's the Q&A section part. So everybody's going to say their spiel, but feel free to type in questions in there in the interim, and then we'll get to them once we're done at the end. And also in the chat, I'm going to share my email for folks. So if folks have questions afterwards, I can direct you to other folks as well. So take this opportunity to ask whatever questions that you want. And so you're up next, Matt.
All right, thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Vogel. I'm going to apologize in advance. My childcare fell through, so if you hear a screaming baby in the background, my bad. So I'm Matt. I'm a faculty member in the School of Criminal Justice at the University at Albany. And I'll be honest, I'm coming to this panel from a slightly different background from the rest of the speakers here today. I'm still an academic, for better or worse, although I worked for a number of years on program evaluation prior to getting my PhD. And I actually currently, I recently started a small consulting firm that employs some non-academic folks. I've worked for the past 9 years or so in PhD granting institutions, both in Albany as well as in St. Louis. And so I've got some insight into the traditional types of PhD training that we provide in the field. I also spend a lot of my time working with community agencies, primarily law firms, health departments, hospitals, and schools. And so I think through these experiences over the years, I've developed some appreciation of the skills that translate well into non-academic or alt-academic, whatever moniker we're going to use, into jobs that aren't in academia. And I think I've identified some deficiencies in our typical professional training, and that's coming from my point of view as a faculty member that trains PhD students. So I've identified some deficiencies that I feel widen the divide between the skills that we prize and then the types of things that would benefit those of you who are looking for non-academic jobs. And so my purpose in joining this discussion as an academic is really twofold. On the one hand, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody here in the audience that the academic job market is in really bad shape. I mean, things have been bad and hyper-competitive for some time, but they've grown considerably worse as a result of COVID and the economic downturn. And really the general financial crisis that's been bubbling under the surface for the last 10, 15 years. And the proliferation of PhD programs in our discipline, it means that we're graduating more people every year than we can possibly employ with PhDs. There's a real mismatch there. And I hate to be the optimist in the room, but things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And that's just the reality of what we're facing in higher ed right now. And so this leads, in my mind, as a faculty member, to a second problem that I think we need to address as a discipline, and one that we're not really considering right now. Right? Most of our programs are oriented around training students, PhD students in particular, to become academics, and really not much else, right? We're training people to get academic jobs. And in a lot of places too, I mean, people I've worked with over the years, we tend to look down our noses at students that want to do anything else. And I think that's unfortunate. And so the second reason I'm here today is hopefully to start a discussion about the ways that we might be able to re-envision the training we provide to maybe better prepare our students for positions when they leave, and especially for non-academic positions. I'm going to do two things, and I'm going to be brief to leave time for everybody else. So first, I'm going to just talk about my random musings on alt academic careers, non-academic careers, and the things that PhD students could be doing while students to sort of increase their marketability in other sorts of jobs. And I'll end by talking about some of the things that I think we as faculty can do better to train people. All right, so from my point of view as the professor talking to what I presume are some PhD students in the audience, here's what I have to offer. First, I would encourage you guys to train widely in research design and what I'll broadly call data analytics. And in doing so, try to develop a broad portfolio of applied research skills. I mean, definitely take the quantitative classes that are offered in almost every program around the country and develop the best you can a working knowledge of how to do things like wrangle data, become fluent in languages. I would encourage you guys to learn R, but certainly learn Stata or SPSS, right? And familiarize yourselves with the nuts and bolts of common statistical techniques. Now, you don't need to become an expert, but you need to become somewhat proficient. And so a lot of jobs outside of academia would require these basic sort of skills, right? Agencies tend to have data needs and they require support in doing things like collecting, managing, and analyzing data for their own evidence-based portfolios, if you will. These are things that most of you guys probably know how to do or are learning how to do. And you can do so without becoming some expert in whatever the method du jour is. So broad training. My second point here is going to be to balance, that research coursework that we tend to prioritize in our field, right? With courses that teach softer research skills. And I don't mean to say this to diminish any type of research, but becoming something like an effective interviewer or a focus group facilitator, it takes a lot of specialized training and a lot of practice. It's not something that you can just jump into. And so in order, from my point of view, to develop a holistic set of skills in this regard, I would say take classes out of your home department, right? Take classes in places like School of Education, if you have one, the geography department, economics, social welfare, and so on. If you don't have those offerings at your home university, wherever that might be, look at local universities. A lot of places have reciprocity agreements. And so there are ways to develop your skill set outside of the narrow training you're likely receiving right now. And I would say do that, right? To the extent possible, try to gain experience working with community agencies. No matter what you want to do after you get your PhD, no matter what type of career you want, I think this is useful to network outside of whatever relatively small group we network within right now. And as criminologists, or really any specialized higher level PhD program, right, we tend to train people in such a way that we develop our own jargon, right? We have this preference for a certain type of empirical models. And sometimes we tend to look down on approaches and then sort of empirical frameworks and sort of epistemological frameworks that don't narrowly conform to what it is that we are doing. And I would argue there's a lot of really good criminological work that's being conducted by folks who are not in criminology departments. And I think that's key. And I think the people on this panel here today would agree with that because they're some of the top people in the field too. They just don't happen to be housed in an academic unit right now. And so I'd argue that collaborating with community agencies and folks from varied trainings and different backgrounds is going to help widen your perspective. And it'll break you of some of the bad habits you'd otherwise learn as a student through your training. I'd argue that you should apply for summer fellowships at places like BJS, RAND, Vera, and any other number of alphabet soup agencies out there, right? A lot of these places have opportunities every year. I mean, they are competitive, but if you get in, it'll be fantastic for you. It'll give you experience collaborating with diverse teams on what I would call real world problems. In other words, not trying to figure out the stability of self-control, but maybe trying to improve policing for the betterment of anybody. It'll also give you a foot in the door when you get your PhD and you want to pursue something outside of traditional academia. It'll give you a foot in the door for a job afterwards. And I think Kyleigh would probably attest to that as well. A couple other quick things. I would encourage you to learn how to write grants. It's not a skill that we teach. It's not something I started teaching until recently. And this is me almost a decade into training PhD students, okay? Unless you find an industry job like Andy, and I don't want to speak for Andy here, but it's very likely that you'll be relying on soft money at some point in your career, whether it's academic or non-academic. Grant writing is an art more than anything. It takes a lot of practice to get good at, and it's something that few of us learn in graduate school. So if you have the opportunity now, take a workshop, apply for seed funding through your department, if possible, or if you're a graduate student organization. And if possible, where you are, try to collaborate with grant active faculty and try to get in at the ground floor from step one and learn the ropes. All right, that's my spiel to you guys as students. In my last minute or so, I'll say what I feel we need to do better as faculty, better as PhD institutions, and better as a discipline sort of writ large. So as faculty members, I think we need to support students more who are interested in doing things other than becoming academics. There's a lot of you out there, and we need to support you in ways that we historically haven't done. And so from at least what I have observed, and my N is just 2 universities, so I could be really overgeneralizing here, is that a lot of us tend to dismiss students that don't want to follow in our footsteps, don't want to emulate whatever it is that we're doing. And I think we need to be better about that in general. I think things need to change. And then the second thing I would say, and I'll conclude with this, is I think we need to rethink what it means to be a PhD granting institution, to be a PhD department. I think we need to rethink things like our method sequences, right? To include like applied real world research rather than empirical hypothesis testing, right? That tends to permeate almost everything that we do. I mean, this general methods training that characterizes the field is fine, but we should supplement it with courses on things like data analytics, grant writing, translational research, as Kyleigh just said, right? Putting things in very simple terms for general audiences. We suck at that, in general. And we can focus on things in our courses like managing complex relational databases, programming dashboards to make data more available to the public, right? Translating rather complicated findings into intuitive things that the general public can consume, can take home with them. We can require students, for instance, to write white papers or policy briefs, rather than locking themselves away for a year or 18 months focusing on a comprehensive exam that's meant to mirror some sort of empirical paper. It doesn't do much then sort of put people in silos, right? And so what I would argue more than anything, what we should be focusing on, those of us that are teaching PhD students, is to get students out of their silos, or better yet, maybe restructure our programs so we don't silo thinking to begin with. All right, I'm gonna end with a comment I made earlier. There's a lot of really, really interesting work that's happening outside of academic criminology departments. And there's a lot of meaningful ways that we can translate our education and training into meaningful careers and actually still have an impact on things like crime, justice, and public policy. So I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Do you want to go next, Jen?
I sure do.
Okay.
That segues nicely into what I'm going to talk about. So thanks, Matt. So I'm Jennifer Gonzalez. You may know me by Jennifer Reingle or Jennifer Reingle-Gonzalez. It's hard to get married in the middle of your career. So I recently left academia about a year ago. I'm currently serving as the Senior Director of Population Health at the Meadows Institute, where we focus on mental health policy in the state of Texas and increasingly nationwide. So my job is to manage a data team that was largely outsourced. All of the data work of the Institute was outsourced in the past. So there was literally no data-driven there was no infrastructure for anything data or research related at this quote unquote think tank that's supposed to do research and evaluation that's driven by data, which makes no sense. Right. And so I've since hired 5 full-time folks. The sixth does not know about it yet, but he will find out this afternoon. And so we are actively growing. We have multiple paid interns that come in and often linger for quite some time. So if you're looking for an internship, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And we have several part-time research assistants as well that just kind of stay as long as they'd like and work as much as they want to get experience. But all of these folks are kind of involved in data collection, planning scopes of work, planning data analysis, doing data analysis, writing reports. And I feel like I spend most of my life making things look nice. So data visualization has increasingly become a big part of our work. And for me as a data person, that makes me very uncomfortable. So it's good to have people that really understand a lot of that. So in terms of where I was before and how I got to this position, I took the traditional academic route. I never thought I would be in such a position. Actually, my PhD is in epidemiology with a focus on violent injury. So, you know, I focused on substance use and crime and mental health and such in my dissertation work. I did a traditional postdoc, which is really common in public health. And then I probably went on 6 interviews and eventually got a job in academia. 5 or 6 years later, I went up for tenure, was tenured, and life was easy. Things were good. I had no reason to go anywhere. I could stay on the treadmill for the rest of my life and write the same few grants that I wrote. They come in, that's nice, write some papers, in my free time and kick my feet up and clean my fish tank, right? I decided that I would not, that was wonderful. I could not get dressed for weeks at a time. It was a really nice life. I wasn't actively looking for anything else. I became involved in this work group that I really didn't want to be a part of, but I had some time, and so I did it. It was on like jail-based competency restoration or something. And that's where I met my current boss, and he's a very influential man. And so he just kind of he loves epidemiologists. And so he kind of latched on to me, and we started going to lunch every once in a while. The next thing you know, he's buying 25% of my time to work on a clinical trial that they had going on at the Institute. And then the next thing you know, a year later, it was, why don't you just come full time? We'd love to just do all this stuff now. And it took me a solid month and a half to kind of think through what that would mean for me and my career and my life as a whole. And I really didn't want to lose that flexibility. To me, the flexibility of academia was what was really nice about it. Like I could work at night, I could work in the middle of the night, whenever, like nobody's gonna tell me what to do. And that's largely still been the case. Like my current job, nobody's telling me what to do. It's fully remote. I still don't get dressed for weeks at a time. There's no boss kind of breathing down your neck. And there may be, Kyleigh may have a boss breathing down her neck, and you always have to be near your phone to answer that. And it may be different at the Research Triangle Institute or other places, other think tanks. So everybody's kind of functioning differently. But I find that many places operate remotely now because of the low overhead, which gives you that great deal of flexibility that we had in academia. And so I decided that, well, the things that were really important to me were the flexibility, the opportunity to grow. So instead of staying on this treadmill that I was on, just write a couple grants, write a couple papers about how gender is a moderator of X, Y, and Z. They would get published, life goes on, things are great. I got to do work that I thought was really meaningful. So in academia, you really don't get anything for disseminating your work or making sure that it is translated into something. It may just sit on a shelf. Somebody reads it, somebody cites it, that's nice. You get an email that somebody cited it. But is it really like having an impact? Like, is this program that you just showed as evidence-based in this $2.5 million grant, you just spent $2.5 million of taxpayer money for this program to sit on a shelf? Happens every day, happens all the time, because we're not rewarded we don't have time or energy, or there's no benefit to getting programs out there. And that's something I really was frustrated by, is I had a portfolio of over $10 million of research funding as an investigator, funding from National Institute of Health and SAMHSA and all kinds of alphabet soup places, and the work just largely sat on a shelf. And so this new job would give me the opportunity to really take that work and push it. Then we have dedicated lobbying teams that'll go down to the state capitol and talk to legislators about this. So we currently work a lot with Senator Cornyn to get policy, to get our agenda pushed federally. And so that's been really exciting for me. In fact, one white paper that we wrote on the effects of COVID-related unemployment on deaths of despair, things like alcohol, substance use disorder, suicide, that has been cited and in the media more than any single paper I've ever written in my 120 some odd papers, millions of dollars of money. This one paper that was not even a scientific study, like it was a projection based on somebody's beta coefficient. It was not, this is like some multiplication here. This paper got more attention than I could ever have imagined. And so just having like really good people, a really good team of people that care about like the full spectrum of work and making things happen, I think was really important to me. And then I didn't want to be, the limited bureaucracy was nice. If any of you have worked at the state, you know that, well, I mean, our organization sounds like Kyleigh's is a little bit more, at Pew is a little bit more bureaucratic, but we're less bureaucratic. So we have 75 employees. Everybody works remotely. There's almost no bureaucracy. So if I want to book a flight, I just book it. I book, business class, whatever I want to book. I book a nice hotel and I submit it for reimbursement and I get it. In fact, if I want to tip the housekeeper $10, I just say I did and I get $10. And so if you work for the state, that would give you a heart attack because you knew that you were never going to get your $10 back. And so you would never tip the maid, right? Which is just not the kind thing to do. And so that's just kind of like you get used to being treated like a real person who's valuable. And so that's kind of a really nice perk that I didn't think about. But I also don't have to worry about my research staff. So I was always concerned that my research coordinator would lose his job because I ran out of funding or I didn't get the next grant or whatnot. The state they weren't going to pick up anybody's time for me. He was entirely self-money. And so, I mean, I had to cover 20% of my salary just to keep my job, make sure I made what I make. If not, there was some talk about, it's not a whole lot of money, 20% of your salary, but it's something over your head. And a lot of universities in public health, and I suspect in other disciplines as well, will be going to a model where they ask you to fund half of your salary or even more. Some like Johns Hopkins require you just to fund your whole salary and any research staff that you have. So it's just kind of like a lingering, even if you don't have a problem getting money, it's just always like in your mind. And that's kind of irritating, even if you're doing well. So anyway, there's also a lot of pettiness and like you would be blown away at some of the people that in academia that are tenured full professors, and the pettiness and the do your time kind of mentality and almost ageism that exists in academia. And I found that incredibly frustrating as well. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind for your really high achievers out there. Let me tell you about some of the things that I look for when I hire people. So like I said, I have 6 full-time folks. They range the full spectrum of PhD to some people just completed a bachelor's degree, all working on data stuff. They have different skill sets. They use different programs. It doesn't matter which program you use unless it's SAS, because that's too expensive. I can't afford SAS. But if you use Stata or whatnot, that's reasonable. Or Python. But really the most important thing is the soft skills that you have and your network. So we've never posted a job at my institute, not in my team at least. I've never seen one. So you would get it because I know you and I want you to come, and we have enough money to pay you a lot more than you're making now because we want you to feel valued and stay forever. And so we're going to bait you, we're going to suck you in, and you may not know it yet. Right. And so the more that you're really easy to work with and agreeable, and you have great skills, because everybody has great skills. Everybody's great at data analysis. But the more you know people like me, not that I'm like the most important person, but the more you know like people like Kyleigh who can get you the job. And so you're always wanting to do things like this annoying work group on jail-based competency restoration that I did not at all want to do. That annoying group led me to my current job, which I'm extremely happy at. And so I'm thankful that I did it, even though it was painful doing it. So sometimes you agree to things that you don't necessarily want to do, but just because it's a good opportunity to meet folks that are super important or could be able to help you in some way later in your career. And those opportunities will find you where you don't expect them. They'll find you. You will find them where whatever. You get what I'm trying to say, where you don't expect them. So be super teachable and willing to learn. That's a huge deal for me, for my kids. I want to say they're like 23 who just have a bachelor's degree. They're great at coding. They taught themselves how to do it. I have my jack of all trades, I call him, who's learned Tableau. He does mapping and ArcGIS, a little bit of everything. He's super valuable, one of my most valuable employees. He's wonderful. So just having those qualities can really make you stand out of the crowd. And I always told my PhD students when I was at the university, when you get a faculty job, because I just assumed everybody would have a faculty job because that's what you do. You need to take somebody to lunch every month or whatever, a new person who's working in your field locally, and go to lunch or have a coffee chat, whatever, with that person. You don't ever know when it's going to come in handy, but at some point it will. Like 2 years down the road, that person's going to come in handy for you. And so people have found that very useful. And And I still continue to do that with people who I want to recruit for my data team, but don't yet have the need for, but I will. So that's something I use. So you guys should use it too. There shouldn't be afraid to reach out to people like me and try to schedule a little coffee chat in the middle of the day. And other folks have said this, but knowing how to talk about data and statistics in a normal language is insanely important. Like, it's exceptionally important to know how to do that. To be able to communicate really complicated things sometimes in a very simple way, and to be able to show those things visually in an appealing way is probably the most important thing that we do. Like, I spent half my day trying to make things look nicer, which is less than fun, but it's a skill that you really need to learn how to develop as a PhD student. And then related to this, to communicate professionally. So I was surprised at how many people like use incorrect capitalization in their emails, or just like don't use periods at the end of sentences, or send text messages that are inappropriate. And so if it's non-personal, so it may not be work, but it's somebody's not your friend, then you should, even if it's a text, you should use full sentences and be grammatically correct. You want to leave a good impression on all these folks, because people do pay attention to that. And I couldn't trust somebody who doesn't use the correct grammar to reach out to my external stakeholders, or somebody who's, sending us a few $1 million to work on a project. I couldn't have them be my program manager. It's unfortunate that it works that way, but it's something that we really pay attention to quite a bit. And I think those are all my tips and tricks. So I hope that was kind of helpful, considering that we're a little bit of a different think tank than Pew is. And so I look forward to answering any questions during the Q&A. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Andy. Hope I left you some time.
No, we're doing good. So there's questions coming in. Thank you guys. Thank you, Jen, Matt, and Kyleigh, for giving your feedback and stuff. I just wanted to go over quick. So Kyleigh and Jen are at think tanks. A couple different opportunities that you want to keep in mind are government positions. So I don't really know what's going on in DC at the moment, so I cannot give any advice about jobs at DOJ or cops or whatever about that. But there are a ton of different local public sector opportunities. I worked as a crime analyst when I was doing my PhD. Would totally do crime analysis as a career. Most crime analysts, you're a bit underemployed if you have a PhD, but I really enjoyed it. And then a lot of different larger departments are opening up to more advanced, and a lot of times they'll post it as a data scientist or a researcher, things like that. So Dallas, a lot of the different cities, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Arlington, I've seen have recent data science positions. And a lot of times they're focused in the police department. Austin PD recently hired a PhD researcher to go down for them. So you just have to look. I got my PhD up in Albany, the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, and then I'm blanking on the name, but there was a juvenile justice one across the river in Rensselaer. Those were really great places to work at. They had a ton of different PhD individuals from the SUNY PhD program. So those were great jobs that you should keep on your mind. The last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was I'm the sole representative that's currently in the private sector. And so folks sort of touched on the different skills that you need to worry about, which translate almost 100% to the private sector stuff. My company now, we hire people just to do Tableau dashboards, for example. So I just wanted to give a little bit of description about like what I'm doing. So my company is called HMS. We're in healthcare. We deal with health insurance claims. And so most of what my job is using predictive models to identify bad Medicare and Medicaid health insurance claims. And so I'm not squeezing out an extra penny for Pepsi. Like, I find my work that I'm doing meaningful in that it's saving states a lot of money to identify these problematic health insurance claims. And I personally find it meaningful, and I'm happy that I made that switch. And so that's the main thing. I don't want to like dig on people who work for Pepsi or whatever, but you can find socially meaningful work in the private sector. And so there's a ton of good think tanks here in the criminal justice area. And then there's a lot of good opportunities in the private sector that you'll find meaningful as well. So you shouldn't like sandbox yourself into only looking at tenure track jobs. And so there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I think it even should be before the tenure track positions. Like I said, me and Jen, we're on the tenure track. We intentionally left to go pursue these other opportunities. So I think it should be normalized, and you should start doing it right now. Even if you're not finished with your PhD, you should be applying to these positions. And so that's it. We'll turn it over. We got a few questions coming in now, and my work doesn't use Zoom, so I'm not very good at this. So I'll see if I can figure it out. But I think I'm just going to try to take them as they're coming up, popping in the Q&A. So here, let me click this button. Are folks seeing that in the Q&A part that popped up, the answer live thing? Can you see that, Kyleigh and Jen and Matt?
I see it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Andy, the panelists can see it. The attendees cannot.
The attendees cannot, so I don't. Okay, so here we have, can panelists offer specific strategies for locating these alt academic job opportunities? Where are the best places to look? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Well, I noted that we don't ever post our jobs, so you would have to know me somehow, or one of my colleagues, and so that's where the importance of networking kind of comes in. I have random people message me on LinkedIn. Often former students want to touch base, and we have coffee, and I'm always happy to do that. I don't, everyone's busy, and you're never too busy to take 30 minutes because you can't eat on Zoom, but you can have coffee on Zoom, right? So everybody needs a coffee break. So that's always something I'm happy to schedule, especially with people who are looking to do something like what I did, go from tenure to not, which is scary. So
I think that's mostly applicable to a lot of different places. So even if a place like RTI or RAND has on their website, they always have job openings. So you can always just go on the website and apply. But it makes total sense to, if you know somebody, totally schmooze up to somebody at a conference and get their email and go out and just ask them about job opportunities, because those will be the folks that are like pushing you through. In terms of this, and it works the same way for state stuff as well. For the private sector stuff, I got my job just looking at LinkedIn and applying. So if I go on LinkedIn right now and I could find 20 different jobs I could apply for data science in the DFW area. And so Dallas isn't like considered an Uber tech place or anything like that, but large urban areas have a lot of different opportunities. And you just got to go out and do a Google search for them. They're not that hard to come by.
how did you find your job, Kyleigh?
I believe I found it on the ASC like employment exchange. I think that's actually what ACJS calls theirs, but we'll pretend it's the same thing. And I know that since I've been at Pew, I always encourage them to, at least for my team, to post those positions to those same employment exchange at ACJS's website or at ASC's website. And then, like Andrew was saying, also LinkedIn, and then honestly, depending on the type of sector that you're thinking of going into, Indeed and like idealist.com, they have a lot of good job opportunities there as well. So it definitely helps to know someone in the organization that you're looking at. But you can go to maybe those more generalized job application sites for jobs like these.
Yeah, so on to the next question. Do you think there's job security for data scientists in their later careers? And so I don't know what sort of the lay of the land is for think tanks, but in terms of private sector data science jobs, there's there's a couple different layers to it. So you could be a data scientist for a startup, which is very volatile. So you may actually get shares in the company. So you got a big upside, but a big downside too. So you're going to be working a ton, and that company may go under. If you work for a big company, so HMS has like 3,000 some employees or something like that. I am not worried about my job security at all. Like they're not going out firing people left and right. And so if you work for a big company, you really have job security in a way. It's not tenure. You can't go out and be a total dick to people and still keep your job, but that's not it. That's not an issue for normal people. Like you have to show up to work and do a good job and stuff, but I'm not going to get fired from HMS on the whims of somebody else. And so it wouldn't surprise me if long-term data science goes to a more gig economy for a lot of different smaller firms, but for larger firms, I don't think that that's going to happen. So I'm not worried about it at all. Did you have some input, Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to give the panel like a 4-minute warning here.
Okay. Yeah.
Time.
So yeah, we got some questions coming in. So if we don't get to anybody, I will put in my chat quick my email, so you can send me an email. I don't know if our emails are up on the CrimCon website, but send it to me and I can forward it to whoever as well. And so let's see who we got next. So in terms of impact, so Jen talked about that and Kyleigh talked about that as well. And my experiences are very similar. It's very superficial writing papers just in the end. So I wrote papers and a lot of times nothing would happen with it. Even if I was collaborating with a police agency, there's transaction costs to working with police agencies. Like I couldn't be there and hold their hands about implementing a particular practice once that research project was over. And so let me see, we have a few different, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job doing the Q&A. Do Jen, Kyleigh, or Matt want to jump in on this question anymore or no? All right, going on. Sorry, I'm not a super good Zoomer right here. So this is a little bit different than WebEx, but what can folks who are already in the all-ac space do for current grad students to provide them with the support to consider their path? Do you want to take this, Matt?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This is a great question. What I would say, one, is avail yourself. I'm not sure who you are, you're anonymous, and what exactly it is you're doing. But I would say avail yourself to sort of local departments, local PhD programs. If you don't know faculty, reach out. If there's an opportunity for collaboration with faculty or PhD students through paid internships, preferably, but even unpaid ones, just bringing students in, showing them the ropes, getting them involved with some of the things that it is that you do, I think would be very helpful. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between people sort of in my position or in the academic positions and people in the community. We don't often communicate very well. We don't have strong sort of networks between us. And anything you can do yourself to link up with some academic programs nearby and get PhD students, I think would be quite useful. So I will cut that short because we have 1 minute left, but good question.
Okay, let me see. So we probably only have time for one more. So this was the first one that come in, so I want to do this one next. How would you recommend overcoming the gap between an academic specialized proficiency with some tasks, despite lower seniority? Did you want to do this one, Kyleigh? Because I think it was after your talk.
I guess I don't fully understand the question. Okay, understand the gap between, so, you know, the good thing about my team specifically is that the specialization actually is a good thing. So, you know, we do work on very specific topics. And so I think that specialized knowledge is good. You just have to be able to translate that specialized knowledge for people that might not be familiar with it. And so, you know, a lot of times, like right now, we're looking for someone for our community supervision team. And one of the things that we're having an issue with is that there's not a lot of specialized knowledge in that specific topic for the people that are applying. And so I would say that specialized knowledge is not necessarily a detriment to you in this type of position. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
And we're out of time, so sorry we're not able to address everybody's questions. But if you go to the chat, we got emails, and if you Google us, I'm pretty sure our emails will come up anyway. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, Kyleigh, Jen, and Matt, and thank you, Jim from CrimCon again for putting this together. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I just want to thank all the panelists for coming. I'd also like to thank the attendees as well. We're going to have this video up hopefully by the end of the year on our YouTube page. In the meantime, just some housekeeping stuff. If you are presenting or if you are attending the next panel on this stream, I have to end this session now to stop the recording, and then I'm going to have to restart it again, and we'll start with the panelists in 5 minutes, and then we'll be broadcasting at the top of the hour. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time, both panelists and the attendees, and stay happy and healthy. I'll see you soon.